Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
All right, welcome. I'm JT, and I'm here with my co-host.
Hey, I'm Kirby.
And our special guest today is the creative director and lead designer of the new Cortex Prime game, Cam Banks.
Hey there. I'm really happy to be here today.
We're so happy to have you. Thank you so much for making time in what I imagine is a somewhat busy schedule to talk to us.
It's a little bit chaotic, but I'm always keen to talk to people about this.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly excited because, Cortex Prime officially launched to the public yesterday. Some of us that were in the Kickstarter got our books, but now it's sort of out there.
Yeah, I mean, the backers were getting theirs staged out over the last couple of weeks, and there's nothing like it, seeing people get the stuff that they've been waiting for all this time and having the feedback come in, pictures of the book in people's hands. It's wonderful. It's really, really good.
Yeah, and I know that this has sort of been a project that's been a long time in the making, so I'm sure that it feels good to sort of finally be able to say, like, okay, we've sort of got everything in place now, and, people are going to enjoy what we've been doing all this time.
Yeah, there are several stages of relief, which is like when the book's finally in layout, when the book's finally off to press, when the book's finally, being shipped to the fulfillment. All those things are like little, stages of removing the weight off your shoulders, as it were. And now that it's out there and it's a real physical thing people have, it's just tremendous.
Great. And I know that you're planning on releasing digital copies in the future, so I'm sure that people can look forward to that as well.
Yeah, we're hard at work on that. That's at cortexrpg.com, our website for all things Cortex. The goal is to have that digital aspect of it. You can see a little bit of it now. We've done some previews, samples of how we're going to do it, but we're really ramping up things and hoping to make this sort of a multimedia user experience.
And to clarify for our listeners at home, you can, at the time of this recording, you can order a book, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you also get a code for a digital copy and I believe compendium access.
Yeah, that's inside the cover of the hardback, which you can buy at stores. We're still, I mean, obviously, when things roll out distribution wise, it's not yet in everywhere and people have to order it for it to show up in a store. We don't drive around to each place and drop them off in a big truck, for example. But yeah, once you get your book, and this has been true for the backers, and it's true for anyone who gets it from a store now, there's a code on the inside cover which you can go to cortexrpg.com and enter it, and it does unlock both the PDF of the book and also what we're calling the compendium, which is kind of a digital version of the book as readable through a browser.
Yeah, I actually got to check that out when I got my Kickstarter copy of the book, and I really liked the layout and design of the website. So props to you and fandom for putting all of that together.
Yep, that's the goal, just trying to make as much as we can of this sort of thing, because we're looking ahead to the future. We obviously know that the kind of things that people are doing more often online and sharing things around the table on the tablets and so on, making it easier for folks to play Cortex is the goal.
Yeah, that's great. I do most of my gaming online actually, especially now during COVID and stuff, even more so. But as an online gamer, I really like having that digital support for my gaming.
Yeah, and we're hoping to make it even better. I mean, obviously, this is our first release of it. We'll be making tweaks, we'll be upgrading things, adding more features. It's an ongoing process.
This has been the first real Cortex game that's come out in a few years, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Cam?
That's right. Yeah, the last one that came out in any kind of publishing sort of sense, I guess, was Firefly, and that was several years ago. The last game that Margaret Wise Productions released.
Right, yeah. So it's kind of exciting because I feel like a lot of new players now are going to be exposed to the Cortex system and get their hands on that. But yeah, so for those people who might be new to the system, maybe never had experiences with Firefly or Smallville or any of those previous Cortex games, how would you describe the system?
I guess there are sort of shorthand words that we can use to talk about it. It's like a roll and keep dice mechanic. You pull a dice pool together out of different sized dice from your character sheets. You roll them whenever you're doing any kind of action or test or contest, as we call them in the default of the game, and then you keep two dice out of that roll, and that's your total. So it's not terribly difficult. The only math that we use ever is addition, which I think is good for me since I'm getting on in years now, obviously. And the the fact that most rolls are opposed, so that there's a quite a good spread of results you can get. Really good opportunity to really do really well or fail terribly. That's sort of the designer intent to have that be in place. So yeah, dice pool game, roll and keep, lots of different things. All the stats are measured out in dice ratings. So when you use a stat, you'll be using that actual die in your pool, and everything else builds on from there. It's more of a toolkit system, to be honest, because the game handbook that you get, the one you've obviously got from Kickstarter and so on, that is kind of aimed at building the game as opposed to being a playable game out of the box, which is kind of challenging for some folks, but it's also something that a lot of people have been really asking for, just something they can pick up and create their own game the way that we have in the past made games for each of the licenses.
And on top of that, so this toolkit system can be used for a multitude of genres. You can be playing your favorite IPs, you can be creating your own worlds. What would you say, in your opinion, makes Cortex more unique compared to other toolbox systems?
I think the fluidity of those choices you have is a big part of it. You can tailor so much of it to what you want at your table and the players you've got, and maybe even your choices of which games you've liked in the past, because all of those mods, all of those options are present and explained and given examples in the toolkit in the game handbook. Whereas it's not like we've taken the game and taken all the IP off the game and just sort of let that game be as it is, standalone and generic. We're not only doing that, we're taking the whole game apart and presenting you with kind of a buffet of the pieces. It's a Lego brick building box kind of thing in a way, right? It's not necessarily just the same system for every game. It will change and adapt as you adapt it to whatever genre and IP you like.
And I actually really like that sort of modular design for the system because having used other generic systems in the past, a lot of them sort of just have one way of doing things. And sometimes I feel like it works better for certain types of games than others. But with this setup, you can kind of sort of adapt it based on like the tone you want, and like if you wanted it to be more gritty or sort of like more cinematic. And there's sort of doesn't seem to be an issue with tweaking those dials to make it the game you want.
Also, believe that on the face of it, it is kind of aimed more at trying to capture kind of a cinematic movie, TV, comic book, literature kind of. It came out of licensed adaptation, so it did, a lot has a lot of that still on its components. But as you say, you can strip away a lot of that and go back to even something more kind of old school or traditional if you want, because all the pieces are there to do that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. And I mean, I know that you've worked on a few or uh, a lot of the IPs for Cortex in the past. Like I know you did Smallville, Supernatural, Leverage, Marvel Heroic, Firefly, and so obviously that seemed to work for those types of properties too. What is it about Cortex, do you think, that sort of makes it so good for those types of stories?
Just that you can wrap it around an IP as opposed to trying to wrap the IP around it, is how I've always described it.
Yeah, that makes sense because a lot of those shows and IPs are very different from one another. So,
Yeah, no, I mean, at one point we had both Leverage and Smallville going at the same time in production, and I was overseeing both projects, but we had different teams, and I would jump into one team and say, "How's it going with this? Let's do this," and then jump over to the other one, and it was a radically different kind of thing. And so there are days when you have to take off your various IP hats, put them on, and make sure you don't cross the wires too much. But I think underneath all of it is the same kind of principle that we try to apply to it, which is always trying to model what we want the experience to be, and less trying to um, bend and mutilate the IP to try and fit what we already had as far as the system goes.
Definitely. I think fans who have come from those old IPs, or people who are perhaps discovering those older editions, as it were, of Cortex in the past, are going to see that these IPs vary dramatically from one another in all the right ways, while still keeping the core like Cortex system there. Did you find in gathering all of these tools from the various Cortex IPs of yesterday, that anything was particularly hard to translate or inform your design decisions for Cortex Prime at all?
Yeah, the early days of the development of Cortex Prime, back before Fandom bought all of the rights for Cortex, it was just basically just me with my Kickstarter trying to cobble everything together to make kind of a whole. And there were various points at which I had to make decisions about whether I wanted to keep everything intact, or do I upgrade some things to change things, more to meet what I felt were the current best practices for the RPG design. The main thing that happened was I arrived at a consistent set of terms for things. So there are a lot of things from the older games where the rules and the mechanics are still in Cortex Prime, but I had to make a decision that between several games they had different names for the same thing. So, I just said, okay, look, this is what this is. This term means this thing. This term means this thing, and that's how it is. So you can rebuild those old games with Cortex Prime, but you may end up having to change a couple of the names around, if that makes any sense. That's the biggest challenge was just pulling it all together and making it coherent.
It seems like you kind of were able to sort of take all the best things from the various games that you had in the past and sort of unify it together then to sort of make it modular, do what you want toolkit.
Yep, that was the plan. I'm very happy it turned out well, because there's definitely there was a potential timeline in which it was going to be a complete disaster, and luckily I think I avoided that.
There's a lot of there's a lot of moving parts that you had to put together and make sure that they worked well with one another, because players grabbing this handbook, which is going to teach them how to not only play the game but make their own, basically have all these different ingredients that they had to put together, and all had to basically taste good together, as it were.
The other funny thing about this is that when going back over, there were certain parts that I knew I needed to include, like mods, options, and things that I myself maybe wouldn't use at the table, but which I understood that were very important to a certain style of play that I wanted to be able to address, right? So, although this whole game itself is my my ideal of a toolkit system, that doesn't mean that I would myself use every single piece of it, just as other people wouldn't use everything that I would use.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, that's totally fair. And I think that the really nice thing is that you don't have to use everything that's in there. And it's kind of just, giving you a lot of different options to do things the way you want. So actually, I was curious. I know that before the Cortex properties were all sort of being published under Margaret Weiss Productions, and then she sort of retired. So how did it come about you picking up the license for the Cortex system?
Margaret actually offered me the license, sort of to do whatever I wanted to with Cortex after that. And I had presented this idea during Cortex Prime, and being one of those people who tried to come up with clever names for things, Prime was intended to be, this is the be all end all. You don't have to worry about what has happened before. Now we're going ahead with this thing from now on. So that led to me thinking, just about taking everything together and making a single unified system out of it, which was something Margaret thought was a good idea. She certainly wasn't going to be publishing any more games, and so offered this extended license to me. And over the course of the next couple of years with the Kickstarter and so on, it became clear that there was a lot more involved in that than maybe I had anticipated, which was, that's fair enough, I suppose. One thing I do very well is I love to have a collaborative team. And when Fandom came on board to buy all these rights and to help me get the Kickstarter to fruition, and then pursue a larger idea of what we could do with Cortex in the future, I was able to bring on some of my folks that I had from before, including editor Amanda Valentine, and then also get some really, really stellar talents like Tina Collier, who's the one who is responsible for the amazing art direction and the layout. And
Oh yeah.
this team, I mean, I could not ask for a better group of people. And right now, we're obviously working on future projects with them, and every day I talk to them. We have meetings all the time. We brought on Dan Telfer, who is formerly from Mad Magazine. He's also responsible for, I think it's called. Oh, he's going to be so mad that I forgot the name of his podcast. But he's a comedian out of California and also a really talented writer. So we've got this team of people together and lots of contractors and people that we have such a huge scope of what we can do as potential. And it came out of fandom seeing in what I had started out, and having the potential there. But again, like if I didn't have that team now, I couldn't have done the book that we've got now on sale.
Yeah, so it sounds like fandom really helped out. Would you say that they sort of changed the trajectory of Cortex Prime, or did they just, enhance the process, or how would you describe that?
I think they helped me realize it. The trajectory is another way of describing. Yes, it certainly went stratospheric after that point. But if I had all the options that I wanted to do, if I wanted to make it the best possible thing, that they actually helped me realize that, right? And so now we fandom does have this product. We've got this sort of roadmap for the future, and Cam from 2017 would be over the moon, and is, in fact, that's the way now. But if I had said back then, this is what's going to happen, I don't think I would have believed it. I would have been like, well, sure, fine. I'm just going to put out a 6x9 black and white book. It'll be fine. Everyone will, maybe buy it. It'll be okay. No, it's blown way more into this sort of vision of the game as opposed to what I thought was the reality.
Fandom already does things like D&D Beyond, so they already have, experience with sort of doing role-playing games and sort of the online tools and stuff. And so that's kind of cool because I know that they're working on stuff, and we've actually seen some demos of stuff from sort of these like online role-playing tools that you're planning on incorporating into the website, right?
Yeah, there's been sneak peeks visible in various places when we did a big panel at PowerCon, the Masters of the Universe convention, which I'm sure you've all been attendees in multiple years because of your fandom of He-Man. But no, I had never heard of PowerCon before we came on this. I was just amazed at the amount of people who are tuning into that. This year it was virtual because of the epidemic, and so they had us come on board, and I ran a session of Legends of Grayskull, which is an IP we're doing now for some very cool, famous people. In the course of doing that, we actually used kind of a mock-up prototype of what we are hoping to be able to do for online dice rolling and character sheet management and everything else. We had that in place, and I mean, it was just so great. So we've been able to show that off, and that's been recorded. It's on YouTube. You can go check that out. But also, if you have been following them, there's this new Twitch game called Into the Motherlands, which is Tanya DePass's team. She's Cipher of Tier on Twitter. That is a really awesome new Twitch campaign that's been going and will be going for at least 12 sessions. And they're using Cortex Prime as well, independent from us, but we're supporting them with some of the same kind of digital tools. The idea of a character sheet which you can pull dice from and roll them and get your outcomes and so on. So it's really cool to start seeding this sort of these ideas of how we want it to look. I mean, they're still prototypes, still works in progress, but gives you a bit of an idea of what we had in mind.
So I'm very interested in what the Cortex Studio is going to offer, and interested in seeing what that looks like. We did get to. I was watching the stream the other day that you did for PowerCon, and what you have there already looks great. And as I understand it, that was just a mock-up, right? Something that you put together for the demo.
Yeah, yeah. That's. I mean, we've have some amazing talent on the sort of engineering side of the content management side, and that's the kind of thing that we're hoping people get access to, not just for our own stuff, but eventually they'll be able to do their own things on streaming. Obviously, with a podcast, there's less of the visual component, but there's certainly the ability for the GM to be running things behind the scenes and coordinating it much easier than you would have done if it was just dice on paper and so on.
That's going to be pretty cool. Yeah, so I know that in that demo that you actually did at PowerCon for Legends of Grayskull, there was some talk about different flavors, of the characters in the setting, like different Eternias, right?
Hmm.
And do you have any insight you could give us into the way that the system will sort of adapt to these different flavors of He-Man?
Obviously, our goal is for this to be a evergreen RPG, the standalone for all things Masters of the Universe, and that includes She-Ra and all the past iterations of He-Man and the Master of the Universe. There are fans of all these different kind of iterations, I guess, is a good way to put it. They're different universes within a multiverse. So that's our kind of our goal. It is more of a Masters of the Multiverse in that sense. So if you want your game to be a whole lot more gritty and bloodthirsty, like some of the DC comics in the last few years have been, then yeah, you've got that all there. But when I say evergreen, I mean it should have the all the mechanics and rules and ideas and things for running various kinds of games with different flavors. It's not quite as broad as Cortex Prime is in general. I mean, for the most part, all the characters will still have the same character sheets, but there'll be a heavy amount of guidance for the GM and those books as to how to flavor your specific game in a different way.
Yeah, and actually, since you brought up character sheets, there's an interesting point that how are you approaching sort of doing character sheets for all these different games? Because you're never going to be able to just usually use like one generic character sheet, right? If you have all these different options for putting different things in to cater it to your game. So I was curious to hear about how you may be approaching character sheets for the games.
Yeah, sometimes when I pick up a game in the store or I buy one and open up and look at it, the first thing I turn to is the character sheet to give myself a sort of a preview of what the game's like. You can't do that with Cortex Prime. You can't open up the game handbook and see the character sheet. There isn't one. The back of the book has some example characters, and they're all different. And there's example characters throughout the book in various ways. We sort of approach it in terms of here's several builds and ways you could do this, and they're all different. So there's no generic sheet, like you said. So we kind of approach this idea of the digital character builder side of things, much as you were pointing out, D&D Beyond has a really really robust system. We want something equally robust where if you choose these options, it builds a character sheet for you, so that the one that you end up having is the one that you use because it's got all the elements that you had asked to have in your game. So if you wanted life points, for example, then life points will be on the sheet. If you wanted to have values and relationships as your prime stats, then those two are the main stats on there. So that's kind of the goal. Execution of that is all based on how we move through this process, but that's something we had in mind. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Hmm.
Yeah, because I love those digital character building tools. So that's going to be pretty cool, I think.
Would users be able to upload their own assets, as it were, like to further customize their own character sheets with artwork, or even the dice to have special dice for their particular game that they're doing that's maybe not already supported by Cortex?
Yeah, I mean that's the same thing that D&D Beyond does right now with Homebrew. There's options there to add, magic items and all the things that people create on the spur of the moment. A lot of that stuff is intended to be used for private campaigns, and so there's the ability to upload that kind of thing. I think that we don't really want to shy away from that asset either. We want to be able to provide that option for people using it, and the other thing that's related to that is that there will be a Cortex Creator Studio, which is kind of the way to sort of build and write and design and sell your own Cortex settings and products through our website. A little bit like how other places have these sorts of, like the DMs Guild, for example. But the point here will be that you get to use not only our really robust platform and all the digital tools and so on, but you get to sell things and make a little bit of money for your own IP, which I think is kind of a really cool thing to do. Not everyone wants to do that. Not everyone's aiming to be a publisher or anything, but we do make that easier. And the same kind of components and the same kind of tools that you'll be using to do that can also be used for your own campaign in the same way.
Yeah, I think that that sort of adds in like a unique element because a lot of those other marketplaces sort of they're just a place to sort of upload your product, but they don't really have a lot of support necessarily for actually building and designing your product.
Yep.
And it sounds like Cortex Creator Studio will have that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's to the benefit of everybody. I think also, I mean, we're going to be using a lot of these same tools for putting out our own official licensed games that we make. So why not extend the same kind of tools for third-party creators at the same time?
Well, as someone who likes to sort of like design a lot of his own stuff, I definitely appreciate that.
Once again, obviously, that's all very aspirational, but it's definitely on the roadmap. It's the kind of thing we're talking about doing, and it's when is it going to come out? We don't know. We have to sort of roll these things out and add features to the website as we get them done. But man, we have so much stuff that we want to do. It's a really intense few years ahead of us, I think.
Yeah, well, good things come to those who wait, right?
Hmm.
So
For our listeners at home, do you think there's going to be any chance of doing, say, an open or closed beta for people when it's closer to completion?
In terms of their own stuff, or do you mean our material?
In terms of your material.
Yeah, well, we're planning on doing public playtesting of the games that we're putting out. So I don't think we've been talking about the same thing for Tales of Xadia, which is our first game based on Netflix's The Dragon Prince animated show. We do want to have that kind of be a public playtest. So the same thing will also probably be the case for Legends of Grayskull. And anything we do want to get folks on board and let them try it out before we even finish the product.
Awesome, yeah, and we saw trailers for both of those, and we obviously have your demo for Legends of Grayskull. Uh, JT and I were both curious, how closely were you able to work with, say, the show creators? Because Tales of Xadia is based off the Dragon Prince, which you can watch on Netflix right now, and then but also Masters of the Universe is also getting a new miniseries next week, or next not next week, next year, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, licenses vary from how much interaction you get with the creative teams behind them. Certainly, when we were working back with Margaret Rice Productions on Marvel Heroic, I didn't, have conversations with the artists and writers of the comics. I was working with people from Marvel who managed that kind of thing. But with Leverage, I was in conversation with folks like John Rogers and the people who were in the writers' room for Leverage. So it was really, really different depending on which license we had. I can say that we're working as closely as possible with Wonderstorm, who are the guys who are in charge of Dragon Prince, and they're all very keen partners. We love working with them so far, and Mattel, who are Masters of the Universe, that has been a similarly good arrangement where they're the people who are very enthusiastic about their property. They really like to have partners in our sense who understand it and who are also enthusiastic about it. So there hasn't been any real problem, reaching out and finding the people who we need to talk to within those licenses. So yeah, hopefully that continues in the future with all the other ones we do.
yeah, great. So yeah, with Tales of Xadia, are you going to sort of take, maybe not mechanics wise, but are you going to take a similar approach with Legends of Grayskull, potentially with sort of giving people the tools to sort of adapt it to the type of game that they want?
I mean, I think people will take them and do whatever they want with them anyway. I mean, that's a given. But in the case of Tales of Xadia, we know that there's a specific theme, there's a specific kind of feel to the show, which we're trying to capture with this game. And there won't be a great deal of variety in that because it is what it is. With It's not quite the same kind of thing with Masters of the Universe. Legends of Grayskull is supposed to be a much broader range of different potential feels too, because the property's been around for such a long time. More so with that, and less so with Tales of Xadia, but that's really in tune with the license itself too.
So, are these products going to get continued support, both Legends of Grayskull and Tales of Exadia? But also, I was curious whether the core handbook that has just released would get further support, if that's going to have additional mods presented in a book down the road.
We've got more stuff that came out of the Kickstarter, which we want to release. We've got the system reference, which is not an SID in the sense of open game license. It's more like a kind of an encyclopedic reference guide to the Cortex Prime system, laid out and presented in a very different way from the game handbook. So you could have it at your table and flip open to a section on traits and see all the things about traits and all that kind of thing. That's one thing that's going to be produced and is in the works right now. Also, we have 5 volumes of what we call spotlights, which are additional settings and genre adaptations that we got from a whole slew of amazing people who worked with me on the Kickstarter to do those. And those are all still scheduled to come out, and backers will still get those. Those are Cortex Prime supplements in that sense. They're not really tied into any of the licenses we're doing. And, we imagine that folks who join up with the Cortex Creator Studio will similarly add more to that library of settings.
Yeah, that's great. So actually, Cam, when you were talking a little bit earlier, you had mentioned the artwork of Cortex Prime, and that just, got me. I was opening up my book here and just really admiring a lot of this art. The cover looks
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, and it's sort of got, it really catches the light, sort of, and lots of great stuff with colors. And I'm just like really impressed with the diversity of the art in here, because it looks like you've got a lot of different styles from a lot of different artists, but it all seems to like work with whatever the art is trying to portray, and sort of gives you this feel of Cortex sort of being able to support all these different things. Could you tell us a little bit about the art and the artists that worked on these?
Yeah, I mean, if that's what your feeling is from it, that's great. That's exactly what we're hoping to do. So, I mean, uh, cool success on that regard. I think that Tina's art direction, we had many conversations about how we wanted to do this. We really wanted to reach out to people who weren't necessarily always involved in RPGs before. Tina herself actually comes from packaging design as opposed to being an RPG layout person. And so a lot of the reason that I think this works is because we took a kind of a different angle and said, what do we think would be great in this book? How is it going to support this stuff that I wrote, and make it come off as being fun to read, enjoyable to look at, and inspirational at the same time. So a global group of artists. We've got people from all over the place. Russia and Iran and Malaysia, and obviously parts of the US and Europe. And these artists came together, and I mean, I just every time a new piece would come in, Tina would forward it and say, "Hey, here's the current sketch, or here's the rough layout, and here's the final," and we were all just like, "Wow!" And so, having Tina put them together in the book the way that she's done it has just cemented this idea that it was really important that we do that. We wanted the diversity, we wanted styles to be all over the place, but somehow to be, like coherent in a way that makes it so that it all looks like it belongs in there, as
Mhm.
opposed to just being a jumble of different art, which we could have done, but I didn't want it to be messy. I wanted it to be something that people would really like.
Well, I think you succeeded on that
Yeah,
count.
definitely.
So actually, like at the even at the very beginning of the book, you can see you have different like example situations illustrating the core mechanics of Cortex, and you sort of almost have like comic style examples where you actually see illustrations of what they're talking about, and I thought that was so cool to have.
Jane Default, yeah, it's funny because Jane is a character that was in the years and years ago. We had the Cortex Plus Hackers Guide, and I was told to write up. We'd put the whole thing together, and there was like need for some sort of intro from me. And I said, well, what's the most absolute basic Cortex you could possibly do? And it was kind of what I ended up including there. And then I built on that for this part of the book too. And Jane Default was like, a journalist with this and this. And that was just basic. Now, I don't think anyone should expect to play Cortex just with that sort of bare bones kind of thing. But it was to try and make a point that you start from character and you go and you head out in that direction. And so when we were trying to represent, how do we want to show that the different things you can do in this game and why all of the things are appropriate, that kind of style of like, just it's a, kind of like like you said, very comic booky, but also not, it's like, I'm trying to describe it in the sense that isn't so much comic book, but like New Yorker cartoons or something, like that. It's
Oh yeah.
cartoon from a strip as opposed to being superheroes or something else. So yeah,
Hmm.
I'm a big fan of that. I love that bit. We're giving that part away for free on the website eventually too. The whole thing is going to be um, viewable for people if they want to see what Cortex is about. that opening intro chapter.
Yeah, and also the layout too. I was noticing the layout, and it just looks like it's really nicely done so that, because the point is to sort of have modular rules, and everything sort of has this nice, like, little organized section with its paragraphs, and you talk about all the different things, like having a doom pool and hero dice, and sort of showing the different ways that those can be used, and sort of introducing the various different mechanics that work together, and then you have little tables and things with examples. I thought that was really well done too, in terms of allowing people to more easily digest the rules, I guess you could say.
I mean, obviously, it's information design, right? It's conveying what's in the text in a way that is easy to understand. That's part of the reason why Tina's so good at what she does, is that she grasps that idea that you need to use the graphics and the assets on the page in ways that are helpful, as opposed to getting in the way of your reading of it. Yeah, I fully place all of the blame, as it were, is on Tina for that, because that's the kind of thing I was hoping to see, and then she executed it really flawlessly.
Yeah, so shout out to Tina for sure. Also, because you have Tales of Xadia coming out, and you've got Legends of Grayskull, and you're the creative director and the lead designer for both of those projects,
Yep,
right?
I've head up all of that stuff. If it's creative and it's design, then I'm overseeing all of it, and I leave all the important business development and other stuff to Adam Bradford, who is the VP of Phantom Tabletop. I
Okay.
work with him all the time. He and I have got a really good working relationship, and he's a good friend of mine now too. Adam's the one who sought me out and brought me on board for fandom in the first place, and again, couldn't have done any of this stuff without Adam's leadership on that score. So, if you see a cool license coming out, or if you like what we're doing, Adam's been the one who's sort of spearheaded the acquisition of these licenses and really helped us deliver what we want from them.
Yeah, it seems like it's been a very solid team. But with all these licenses coming your way, is there a certain specific IP that you would love to turn into a Cortex game? Like, well, what's your dream IP, as it were?
I feel like I'm jinxing it if I say anything, right? Because there's so many. Because when we have these discussions behind the scenes, we're like, what would be really cool to get? And then you're like, oh, that would be really great. And then like next week, someone's got it. That's the whole.
Mhm.
That's the way this business works. There's a lot of us out there who want to get cool things and play in sandboxes that we've always wanted since we were kids, and some of them seem like they'd be really cool ideas on paper, and then you think about, well, how would that game work, and you can't see how that would be fun, right?
Mhm.
Anyway, there's books that I like and comic books I like, and if we did a game, it would maybe be about 30 pages long, and no one would buy it. So I don't normally want to go into too much speculation about that, because, like I said, I feel like a jinx it, or someone else would already have it in the works. Back when I did Marvel, I mean, Marvel was one of those things that I really wanted to always work on, because I'm a huge Marvel fan, and getting that was amazing. And then I found out, as we had made the announcement, someone else came to me and said, how did you get that? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, because we did this thing. And we were halfway through the process of getting a pitch to them, and now we're not. And I sort of thought,
Yeah.
man, I always feel bad about that, because we all want to have work on things that we enjoy, and going to work and playing with someone else's content that you've been a fan of for a long time is always fun. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's this stuff. I mean, I could go for hours about stuff I'd love to adapt, but it ultimately doesn't really come down to that so much. It is the reality, I should say, of this sort of publishing business. What can you get? What can you work on? The cool thing about this, though, is that anyone who gets this game and starts tinkering with it can do that. They can get their favorite IP, and they can make a game about it, and they don't have to publish it. They don't have to go to a contract lawyer and so on and do it, because no one's going to come to your table and say, hey, you can't play this. That's not right. Unless they're really public about it and saying, hey, we're doing this thing, we're going to release it online and sell it. That's not good. I think gamers are like this. Gamers have always adapted things to the things they like. However many times have you seen someone say, here's D&D stats for this new TV show that I've just started watching? I'm kind of hoping that people can take Cortex and use it in that way, because that's what it was designed to do.
Yeah, well, I look forward to seeing what new licenses you get in the future. because I'm definitely excited to get some more Cortex in my life.
Well, thanks for joining us today. It's definitely been a pleasure on our end. Is there anything you want to put out to the world with regards to Cortex, or even with just how you're doing?
Well, I'm doing great. This is a dream job for me. I certainly think that everyone should have a chance to dive headfirst into this sort of field if they feel like they can do it. I'm hoping that Cortex allows at least some people to start making games that they didn't know they wanted to make. But my only thing I will say is that it just, everyone needs to hopefully still be patient. We're making more stuff and we'll keep making things. If we had everything front loaded and ready and available right now, we could, but we are only a limited number of folks and we all have our daily schedules that we have to adjust. So, yeah, keep refreshing those pages, keep going back, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else where you can follow us.
Yeah, do you have any specific, like usernames or things for people to look at for that stuff? Or
Well, I am at Boy Monster on Twitter and have done for many, many years, but it is also my personal account, so you will see all kinds of things that aren't related to Cortex on there as well. But Cortex RPG on Twitter is your central repository for all things amazing, and that's moderated by uh, Melly, who is our community manager, and she is fantastic. And the reason why I could even do this podcast today is because she helped coordinate it, because I'm a very uncoordinated person.
yeah, well, thank you, Melly, for helping arrange that. And I think you have links to all the different social media stuff on the website too, so
Yep.
people can always go and check that out
We
there.
do have a Discord, which is a hotbed of fun and enjoyment, and I get to chat to people all the time when I'm not doing my other work. And so, if you're lucky on a good day, I'll be there answering questions, and if it's a bad day, I might even still be there but lurking. The Discord, I think, is also a link on our website too.
Yeah, and we can also include all the links for that in the show notes for our listeners.
Awesome.
Cam, we want to thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us. You're actually our first interview for the show, so that was pretty amazing luck we had there to kick us off that way.
Sort of maybe a low benchmark for the future interview candidates. That's
Oh no. Yeah, no. So I mean, talking to the sort of creator of Cortex Prime is sort of like the ideal first interview, I think. So thank you so much. We're going to be doing things with other Cortex creators and stuff, both large and small, talking about various system mechanics and things and ways to sort of use the Cortex Prime rule set to the fullest. And so maybe we'll get you back on sometime to talk about more stuff.
yeah, happy to do it. You guys are great.
Aw, thank you so much. But yeah, so Cam, thanks again, and we hope that you have a wonderful year ahead, and looking forward to seeing all the new Cortex stuff that comes out.